All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. You're here for how do I balance and prioritize my different roles, right? My name is Lichtman. I'm a psychologist, Director of Yachad. And this is a really, really tough topic to talk about. And it's especially difficult because everybody's situation is unique and different. Just like every person is unique and different, everybody's situation is different. And how we respond and react and interpret situations is different for everybody. So let me just try to share some thoughts with you about how I would think about this. And then if there's time at the end, we'll throw it open to some questions. So let me start by with a quote that I sort of live by. In life, anything is possible. In life, anything is possible. You can do anything, but you can't do everything. You can do anything, but you can't do everything. Okay? And I think, in society, there's a notion, I think, that you can do everything. You can do everything. You can be whatever you want. You can do everything. So I want to argue against that. That is absolutely not true. Anything, but not everything. I think in the Orthodox community in particular, by the way, I think we sell a bill of goods to girls. We send them to yeshivas, and we teach them Limudei Kodesh, Judaic studies, and Limudei Chol, and we tell them you can be everything. You can be a mother and a housewife, and extraordinaire, and you can be the best wife, and you can have a profession, you can have a job, and you can do it all, and you can't do it all. You can't. You cannot. You can do it all, but there's going to be a price to pay. I have my oldest daughter has five children. My 5 grandchildren, 5 and under. Okay, 5, 3.5, 2, and 2 twins who are 8 months old. She's a lawyer. She works in a place called Cravat, one of these white shoe, top-notch New York law firms. She's a very capable person. She went to Yeshiva High School. She went to Columbia University. She went to Columbia University Law School. She was editor-in-chief of Law Review, right? All the things that, virtually anybody would know makes you, pretty capable individual. She is a very capable individual. She has 5 children, okay? Great marriage, 5 children. She can have 5 children. She cannot work for Cravat in the way that they expect you to work, okay, and raise her 5 children. She can't, no matter how capable she is. And she knows that. And therefore, 4 months ago, she moved into our house, and a week ago, she moved into a house around the corner from us because she needs the help of her parents to help raise her grandchildren. And because of that, she went into them and said even part-time, which is part-time in these places is 9 to 6. That's part-time. Literally part-time. You get paid part-time. But she still couldn't do it. And so she went into them and she sold them, and literally tomorrow is starting on a new job there that is not the typical, law firm job. So in life, anything is possible. So how do you balance and prioritize? First, you accept that you can't do everything. You cannot do everything well, okay? And therefore, if you want to balance, it's first about prioritizing. And you have to prioritize and choose, what do I want to do? What do I need to do? What don't I need to do? What might I want to do in a perfect world, but it's not a perfect world, and therefore, what am I not going to do? In terms of the different roles that we play, so let's just again, right? I presume everybody who's sitting here is the parent to a child with special needs. You're probably the parent to other children. You're also a spouse, in most cases, to a husband or a wife. In many instances, you may be or may start to be the child become parent to your parent. Right? As our parents get older, right? Then we assume responsibilities for helping them often. And then, believe it or not, you're an individual yourself with needs. And then, if you are fortunate enough to be married, you're part of a couple, and that's an entity to itself that also needs to be taken care of, supported, etc. So how do you balance these many, many important roles? That's, by the way, Those are roles, we didn't talk about job or anything else. Those are just the interpersonal roles amongst the people that we are most responsible for and most responsible to. So again, I'm going to tell you that it starts with prioritizing. You have to prioritize. Every school, every yeshiva, I believe, should prioritize what it is that they're doing. Some do, many don't. Okay? Most schools, regardless, will tell you that they're going to teach everything. That everything is important and that they're going to teach everything. It's not true. Okay? Not everything is equally important. And kids know this, by the way, right away. Do you think that the subject that is taught 5 days a week versus the subject that's taught 1 day a week, do you think that they think that the 1 day a week subject is as important as the 5 day a week subject? Of course not. So if they learn Navi once a week, okay, and they learn Talmud or Gemara 5 days a week, they know that the school thinks Gemara is really important, and Navi, doesn't matter what the school says, Navi is just not that important. You have art once a week, you have computers once a week, those are things that are not that important. Math you have every day, oh, that's important. English every day, that's important. So, and by the way, I don't think they're all equally important, okay? Just to stick with school for a second, I'm going to tell you, in my humble opinion, or not so humble opinion, reading is the most important subject. Everything else in secular studies or general studies is second to that, at the very least. If you can read, right, then that's a gateway to all the other subjects. If you can read, you can navigate the world. If you can read, reading is a leisure activity, is a pleasurable activity. If you can't read, you're stuck in the water. You're dead in the water. Reading is more important than social studies. How many things of all now it might be the social studies is interesting, okay? But how much of social studies do you remember? Probably not much. Most people don't. So social studies is not as important as reading. The same concept of prioritizing has to be applied, I think, to balancing, our roles. So it starts with, for instance, and these are just, I'm just throwing out my thoughts. Time with our children is more important than time cooking a feast every Shabbat, if that's what you do. Okay? It is more important to spend time with our children than to cook, a 14-course meal Friday night and Shabbos day. Now, some of you may be shaking your heads and saying, "What? We don't do that." Okay, great. If it doesn't apply to you, then it doesn't apply to you. But I'm going to say to you that it's more important, to have a simple chicken and a baked potato or chicken nuggets for the kids and French fries, Friday night for dinner, and that's what we've got. To maybe a salad, it's good enough. More important to spend time with your spouse than to worry about putting out china on Shabbat and having to wash the dishes afterwards. Okay? Amazing Savings has great paper plates. Great paper plates. I'm a big believer in paper plates. Okay? It's not great for the environment, I know, but it's about prioritizing. I care about the environment, I really do. But I care more about my relationship with the people in my family, and I would rather spend time with them than worrying about cleaning dishes.
Costco has the best. Just want to throw that out.
You have no idea, but I think Costco's, it's like music to my...
I know.
Costco is the best store, absolutely.
Best paper plate.
Best everything, basically.
Just want to throw that out there.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so those are just two examples. Now let me give you some more specific guidelines for how you prioritize. So number one, when you have a child with special needs, it's very easy for that to be, for him or her to become, to take up all of your time, relatively speaking, okay? And it's our job as parents not to let that happen. And so, or to put it another way, is we need to spend time with all of our children. Now, it's likely that you're going to spend more time with your child with special needs. And that's probably appropriate and probably necessary. but you have to spend time with your other children also. And you're the parent, and you need to figure out how to do that. And let me give you a very specific example. A long time ago, when I was doing I'm a psychologist, so when I was doing my doctoral dissertation, I did it for 10 years, which meant that for 9 years I said I was doing it, and then for 1 year I actually did it. That year was a terrible year, okay? Because I used to, I would leave my house on Motzei Shabbat, Saturday night, and not come home till Monday night, because I found that was the only way. I wasn't disciplined enough. I couldn't with my kids there. I would much rather play with my kids than work on my stupid dissertation. 10 years in the making. You think what I was interested in 10 years ago, I was interested in 10 years later. It was just what I needed to do. In any event, it was a terrible year. And that year, my wife and I, we agreed that I was going to put, time into it and finish it. And I did, thank God. But that year was terrible, and especially for my oldest daughter, who was then, I don't know, I'll say 9, 10 years old. So she came to me one day, and she said, "Abba, Daddy, I never see you anymore." So talk about, like a knife in the heart. And by the way, she didn't mean, she was very factually saying, what was the reality. I felt terrible. So I said to her, okay, you know what? Next week, Tuesday night, we're going to go to Carvel or whatever. We're going to go to the ice cream store. Just you and me, you and Abba. We're going to go. We're going to have ice cream together. We have a date. Next week comes Tuesday night. Tuesday was, I'm not exaggerating, a blizzard. Blizzard. People weren't going to work. It was terrible. But I promised her we were going to Carvel. Carvel was probably, 10, 12 blocks from our house. We went to Carvel that night. We were the only idiots, in that store eating ice cream that night of the blizzard, but we went. I promised her, I made time, I had to make time. Now, my dissertation got the lion's share of my time that year, okay? But it didn't mean that I still had to spend some time with her. In the same sort of way, a couple of things. I also explained to her what was happening. I explained to her that there was a light at the end of the tunnel, that it was going to come to an end. So if you have other children who are old enough to understand them, by the time kids are certainly 5 years old and older, they can understand. We have an obligation, I think, to explain to them, listen, you have a brother or sister, Chaim, Mary, Sarah, whatever, who it is. They have this difficulty. I need to spend a little bit more time with them. Her mother needs to spend. We need to take them to whatever it may be. Explain it to them. What is much more frightening to children is not knowing. Anything you tell them is less frightening than not telling them. The scariest thing for them is not knowing. They fill in not knowing with stuff that is far scarier than anything you could say to them. So you have to share with your child, with your other children, if you can, if they're ready. And I think in most cases they are, include them. Sometimes they could be helping you take care of the other child with special needs or whatever it might be. So one is time with other children. Number 2, time, as part of a couple or as a spouse. Figure it out. Do what works for you. It could be, there's a concept, date night, once a week. It may be that you don't have once a week. Do once a month. That's okay. But once a month, we go out, and that's our time. It could be out for coffee at Starbucks. It doesn't have to be going out to the fanciest French restaurant. But time where the two of you are alone and away from your children. And you know what? In these cases, again, you don't have money, take the money that you don't have and hire the babysitter. You don't like to ask people for help or friends for help. This is where you do ask a sibling, a close friend, parents who are grandparents. Please, I need you to come and babysit for an hour or 2 hours. It doesn't have to be for 4 hours, but give me an hour or two so that we can go out. You need time for yourself, okay? And whether that time for yourself is in the morning after the kids go to school and you just take 20 minutes to read a book, whether it's going to a class once a week. Listen, I understand well that you might all be thinking, that where do you have that time? You don't have that time. You have to make that time. you will have more and better energy for your child with special needs that is taking so much of your time as needed if you invest some time in yourself as a couple, and in your other children. Okay. So, more specifically, how do you prioritize? So, there's no right way to prioritize. This is the way I think about it, and this is what I would suggest to you, but come up with whatever works for you. But here's one way of looking at it. I'm going to give you four things. Number one, I would start with writing it down. Okay? Write down for yourself what your priorities are. Okay? My child with special needs needs counseling, and they need occupational therapy, and they don't have enough friends. Okay, those are the priorities. For them, what are the other priorities in terms of I need to spend time with I need to earn a living? Whatever the priorities are, make a list of the priorities, the important things, not the urgent things, the important things. And by the way, by making the list, sometimes we can push out the things that sometimes take our attention but aren't that important, and focus on the important things. Write it down, and then force yourself to number them. They're not all equally important. Decide what is more important to you for whatever reason. And by the way, it may not be the same at different points in time. This year, that year that I worked on my dissertation, during that year, working on my dissertation, my education, if you want to call it that, was really, really important. All the other years, I have 2 master's degrees, doctorates, whatever I got, none of it was that important. That year was the one time where I took my education really, really seriously. Every other year, it would be much lower on the priority list. That year, it should have been on the top of the priority list. Okay? Write it down. Number 2, and this is where it all becomes very personal. Share that list either with a spouse or a really close friend. You need to decide, okay? In the best of situations, husbands and wives are best friends. And ideally, you're able to share it with your husband or your wife and say, this is what I think I need to prioritize and or we need to prioritize. But I would focus first on I need to prioritize. This is what I'm thinking about. These are the things I think we need to focus a little less on Chaim, who's got Down syndrome, and more on the other children. Here's the priority list. What do you think? Does this make sense to you? If you can't talk to your husband or wife for whatever reasons about this, then find a close friend. You need a close friend that you can talk to, and run the list by them. What am I missing? Does this list make sense? You're using them as a sounding board. There's something I believe about writing, typing, whatever you want to call it, putting it down on paper, that is very helpful. And then there's something about saying it out loud and talking it out with somebody that I think is very helpful to articulating and figuring out, is this really a priority? How much of a priority? Is this the order that it should stay in? Now, here's a specific sub-suggestion that I want to make, particularly to women, as it relates to your husbands. A bunch of years ago there was a book, men are from Mars, women are from Venus. Okay, it's like really true. We're not the same. We're wired differently. Okay, you know that. Women have a need, it's a real need to talk about things. Without fixing them, just to talk about them. It is helpful, and this is important for men to know and to remember and to re-remember. It is helpful for women, helpful to them to talk about it. Men, on the other hand, are, we think that, if there's a problem, I gotta fix it. So if you're telling me there's a problem, right, you expect me to fix it. So if you're telling me that there's a problem, you must expect me to fix it, and now my defenses go up because I'm overwhelmed also, and now you just gave me this priority list that you're telling me I got to do something, I got to fix something, I got to change something. So if I could, I would suggest to the women, as when you share this list, if you're sharing it with your husband, which would be great, okay, is share it with the disclaimer. I'm not asking you to do anything yet. I'm not. I'm just sharing with you, these are my thoughts, my feelings about the priorities that I need to set now. And as my husband, as my Best friend, I'm asking you, does this make sense to you? And the women need to give the men a chance to process it also. Because no matter how many times you say, I'm not asking you to change anything, we instinctively think you are. And we have to talk ourselves down from that, okay? If I'm the father of a child with special needs, and I am, then I think I have to fix my child. That's just the way I'm wired. It takes a long, long time, if ever, for me to get past that. And so that's my instinctive reaction. And so it's really important for you to tell me, I'm not asking for that. Please, I'm not. I'm sharing with you my priority list. And we men need to understand and remember that it's really important for you, for you to talk about things. Okay, so we've written it down. We've shared it with a spouse or a close friend. Third thing that I would do is, and this is, I think, really important. You need to find, if you're the parent of a child with special needs, you need to find a professional, not a friend, a professional who you trust as a professional. They know their stuff as a professional. They know about disabilities. They know about special needs. That could be a psychologist. It could be a neurologist. It could be a special education teacher. It could be a speech therapist. But somebody who really knows, that you trust, and you know that they're really competent as a professional, and they know your child. And they know your child. And they are the professional sounding board that you go to on a constant basis when you have questions, okay, about what do I do? Should I do? The school is telling me I should do this. Or I'm thinking I should do this, but I don't know. It's a lot of money. Is it really worth it? Is it not worth it? Is this something I should be spending my time on? I have so many things. The school, I need to give my child occupational therapy and counseling and speech therapy, and they have difficulty with math, and they have I can't do it all. So you as a professional, help me to understand, okay, what you think I should do, in what order of priority. And it's different for, different ages, different challenges. So I told you I have a son with Tourette syndrome. Did I tell you, or did I tell the group before? I'm sorry, I don't remember. Sorry. So I have a son who's older now. He's 25 with Tourette syndrome. When he was a little boy, very little, maybe we had Tourette syndrome. So we took him to the Yale Child Study Center. These child study centers, they have a couple in different parts of the country. I think for Tourette syndrome, the Yale Child Study Center is probably the best in the country. And it was relatively accessible. I was living in New Jersey. This is in Connecticut. It's relatively, and there was a professional there, Dr. King, who we stayed in touch with from the time we brought my Jeremy there at age 3, till his early 20s. We would check in with him we didn't talk to him all the time, but once a year, twice a year, if something came up, if there was a question, whether it was about medication, whether it was, whatever it was, and again, by the way, my wife and I we're both psychologists. We picked up on this very early. Actually, it was my wife who picked up on it. I had, as a typical male in this regard, I had more difficulty, acknowledging it at first and recognizing it. But we were fortunate. He was fortunate that we did pick up on it, as early as we did, and begin to address it. Find yourself. It's the special ed teacher that you had, preschool teacher, but somebody who knows their stuff. Not just you like their personality, but they know their stuff in terms of kids and whatever issues, you have a child on the autism spectrum, they know stuff about autism. You have a child with Down syndrome, they know stuff. They've worked with kids who have Down syndrome, and they know your child, and you can pick up the phone and say, the school is saying, the camp is saying, I'm thinking, what should I do? Okay. Number 4. The last thing that I want to give you is some guidelines to think about for I'll put them into 2 different age groups. For children, and then for either close to adults or adults. Again, things to prioritize, if you will, in order to balance. So number 1, if you have little children, If your children are younger, and by younger I mean 0 to 7, maximum really 0 to 5, 0 to 7. So you're probably all familiar with something called early intervention, right? Early intervention or early intervention services, right? So I'm going to tell you that if you're lucky enough, fortunate enough, you recognize something early on and you can access early intervention services, it's one of the most important things to do. What you do, the more time you spend early on will pay off in much greater dividends. So, let me be very concrete about that, okay? If I can give my child speech therapy 3 days a week while they're in preschool, I would rather give them 3 days a week for 2 years of preschool than once or twice a week for 12 or 14 years of school. Take advantage of any early intervention services that you can. The more you do earlier on, the greater the positive impact it tends to have. Number one. Number two, social skills. The session before this that I did was on the importance of social skills. There is nothing more important to my mind than social skills. If our kids have good social skills, then they have a good shot at good quality of life. And if they don't, that drops dramatically. There were two things that I really focused on with my son who has Tourette syndrome when he was a little boy. One was, and I said this at the end of the last session, one was I was really concerned about social skills and socialization. So I made sure that we had the best junk in our house, the best candy. For that, it wasn't just Costco. I had to go to a lot of other places, but I made sure we had the best junk. We always had lots of junk. And our house was a place where kids always knew they could hang out and play. And I played with them. And it didn't matter how tired I was. And I'm not, but there was nothing more important. This is where, Super Bowl parties when they got a little bit older. We're all going to watch the Super Bowl here. We're going to get food from Dougie. Whatever it was, and I'm not a wealthy man, didn't matter. There was nothing more important than my providing socialization and opportunities to teach social skills to my son in those kinds of settings. There's nothing more important than that. Now I'll just tell you, parenthetical. This is really parenthetical. The other thing that I thought was most important was reading. And I didn't trust the school to teach him to read. My wife and I, we taught him to read at home, and it was just, it took a lot of time and effort, but it made him a great reader, and it opened up school and learning for him. Now here's the PS that I want to share with you, but here's what happens at the end. So fast forward to, 4 years ago, I'm in Israel with my son. He's learning in yeshiva there for the second year, and I can visualize it. We're walking down Rehov Emek Raphaim, and he says to me, Abba, Daddy, how come why don't you spend more time learning with me, and more time other kids, their fathers would, learn, memorize Mishnayos. And I had one of those moments, where I started to say to him something about, with your Tourette's, remember we had Shabbos parties every Shabbos all the time. Yeah, I know, but whatever. No, it didn't make any difference. We as parents have to do the best that we can, and then our children will blame us for doing, dropping the ball no matter what. And that's just the way that it is, and that's okay. But after early intervention, if you can still grab that, social skills, I believe, is the most important thing. And last but not least is taking advantage of whatever education you can for your child. But I want to emphasize to you that school is not a metaphor for life. Okay? Sometimes our kids have real difficulty in school. That doesn't mean they're going to have difficulty in life. School is not life. It is life for them when they're in school. Don't misunderstand, it is. But the way schools operate is not the way the world operates. It's not. And the kinds of demands that are made on children within a school setting are not typically the kinds of demands that are made on adults. So you want to take advantage of school as much as possible for your children to learn as much as possible, but don't get so caught up in, like, if they don't, learn this, that, or the other thing, or they're not the end of the world. Let them learn as much as they can. Reading, I would argue, is by far the most important thing. So those are the three things. As adults, here's the three things that I think you need to focus on in particular. Number one is guardianship. Now, whether your child is 21 or late teens nearing 21, if your child is not able to take care of themselves completely, then you want to be their guardian. It's not a complicated thing, but without guardianship, your children, it really can pose a lot of difficult challenges. So guardianship. Number two is vocational, all right? And that starts really with children, all right? Giving them, every child, no matter, almost every child, virtually no matter what their challenges are, can have responsibilities, can have chores, can have jobs to do, and it can even be fun. It's really important to make demands, appropriate demands on our children. Not just our children who don't have special needs, on all of our children. My generation, I think that parents, I'm a little bit, older than I think everybody that's sitting here, I think that my generation tended to want to make kids happy. We wanted our children to be happy. I don't think my parents' generation was as focused on our being happy. There's a happy medium. We're too focused on our kids being happy. Okay? It's not about happy. We want them to have meaningful lives of quality. And virtually every child who then becomes an adult has capacity, has abilities. And when you give them chores and when you give them jobs, okay, to do, then you're saying to them, I regard you as a capable person, whether you're 5 years old or 8 years old. I have a 5-year-old grandson. It's amazing what he can do. They can help you all the time. You're changing the baby. Can you go throw the diaper away in the garbage? Okay, it might be echi. You don't want to throw it. Go bring me the diaper. Okay, that I need to change. That's a job. Okay, that's saying you're capable. Okay, and if you don't do it when I ask you to do it, then I'm going to express disappointment that, I asked you to do something that you're capable of doing. I needed your help. Please, next time, do it. It starts there, and then, it goes on to taking advantage of opportunities to prepare our children, to navigate the world vocationally. And the last thing that in terms of is housing. That's a whole, where they're going to live is a whole other thing, and just too challenging a topic to get into. But those are the kinds of things that I think you need to think about in terms of this balance. So again, you have to try to you make lists, you talk about them, and you set up priorities. And maybe it's something even every year. Right? For the high holidays, for the Yom Narem, right? We do cheshbon and nefesh. We sort of, take, we're supposed to take stock of where are we? Where are we spiritually? Where are we in life? How do we need to improve? So I would argue the same thing is important. If we've got children, and certainly if we have a child with special needs, where is my child? Where are they going? How is it working? What do I need to focus on with them? What do I need to focus on with myself? What do I need to focus on with my family? And it can't be, well, they're all equally important and I'm going to do them well. Because you're not. It's impossible. It's impossible. My daughter can have 5 children. If she's going to work a cravat, she's not going to raise those 5 children. Not if she's going to work the way that they expect her to. She has a choice to make. And we all have those choices to make. It's not an easy choice to make. And you can say, well, I need okay, make a choice. It's okay. I'm not telling you what choice to make. I'm telling you that you need to make a choice. If you don't prioritize, okay, that's a choice also. It is a choice. Make no doubt about it. It's a choice. And I would argue that any decision that you make, any prioritizing that you do, is going to be better than just doing it, like doing what you're doing. So I'll just end with 3 last final thoughts. For all that we're talking about, trying to figuring out what to do, how to balance, how to prioritize, and then balance. So, there's a saying. Ma shelo yaseh hasechel yaseh hazman. Right? That was something that my father-in-law, Alav Shalom, used to say. That what what the mind, what our intellect doesn't, figure out, sort of doesn't do, time will take care of. There's some truth to that. When we're prioritizing and stuff like that, it's amazing. Some things time does fix. Not everything has to be dealt with immediately. And we sometimes have a tendency, especially around a child with special needs, to, I don't want to say catastrophize, but to elevate it to a crisis level when it's not a crisis. Okay, if they need occupational therapy, in most cases, that's not a crisis. They need occupational therapy. And then for that matter, okay, how badly do they need occupational therapy? What do they need it for? Is it because they can't write at all? And even then, by the way, if it's because they can't write, their penmanship is terrible. Right? That's why they need occupational therapy, for fine motor skills. In today's day and age, who writes? Who writes? Seriously, you need to type. Right? We all work on phones and on iPads and tablets and computers and stuff like that. I don't think you need to know how to write. I would, if I had a child with poor penmanship, and by the way, my son had terrible penmanship, and we actually early on put him on a typing program because we knew, what do I have to fight with him about? This is one of the few things that we were really, we sort of, anticipated, was changing and kind of, responded. You don't need to know how to write, so your penmanship is not good. Big deal. Who cares? Really? Who cares? Nobody cares. So that you're going to make a big deal about? If that's what they need OT for, don't worry about OT. Let them spend more time in the classroom, both socializing and learning other things. Again, it's about prioritizing. Speech, okay, depends what. That same son that I had, I regret, not giving him more speech therapy when he was young. He had speech therapy throughout school, and it did nothing. It was once a week, twice a week. It just schlepped. It didn't do anything. At that point, he would have been better off, not even doing it. Okay, so he talks a little bit not clearly. He's married. He got through graduate school. Not the clearest talker in the world. Not the end of the world. Second thing is, keep in mind that things are developmental, and that some, the nature of our kids' challenges have a developmental piece to it, which means that it's changing and evolving, and what is a challenge today may become less of a challenge tomorrow simply because of its developmental nature. Okay? In part, that goes back to, again, having a professional who can point out that kind of thing if you don't know it yourself. But even without the professional, I think, you just have to remember that our kids are changing, both around whatever their special needs are and around their personhood. Our children are not their Down syndrome or their neurological impairment or their autism spectrum. They're not that. That's a piece of what they are, or it's what they have in part. It doesn't define them. They have personalities besides that. And let's remember, they're children or young adults or whatever they are with personalities beyond that. And those change. And I guess the last thing I'll leave you with is just a great quote, I think. And that is that life isn't about how fast you run or how high you climb, but how well you bounce. Because if you have a child with special needs, you're bouncing. Truth is, I think if you're a parent, you're bouncing, and if you have a child with special needs, you're bouncing that much more. So, those are just some thoughts on, you need. If you take nothing else out of this, I think that what I'm trying to say to you is that not everything is equally important, and you need to try to figure out what your priorities are for your child, and for yourself, and your family. Nobody can do that for you. You can get input from others, hopefully from a spouse. You can get input around your child from a professional, and then you have to make some decisions. And then you need to revisit those decisions every once in a while. That's not a weekly thing. Once a year. Or when something develops that, says to you, you know what, it's not the same. We really have to sit down and perhaps reprioritize. But you gotta prioritize. It will help you to balance your life, and it will help you to ultimately to give more to your child with special needs and to be a saner human being in a very insane kind of world. So thank you. If you have any questions or comments, I'll take them now, and otherwise. Thank you for coming. Thank you. There's some handouts over there if you'd like. Good.